DOM manipulation, and we define DOM, what DOM is all about. Said that DOM is an API. Said that the DOM is an API. Check. I want to open that. So share. Okay. Said the DOM is an API. When you say API, you will understand it as time goes on, but I just give you a small I say it's an application programming interface. Now I explained. Okay, let me just see if we still remember. David or Uzi, can you help me? What is an API? What do you understand by an API and how front end interacts with back end? Do you remember the example I gave?
Yeah, I gave an example of a restaurant and the people that bring the packaged items from the back to the customers at the front as the APIs that deliver what is being what was advertised as the API.
Okay. Then the front end guys are which guys?
Sir?
And then the
What
front
you say?
end. I said then the front end and the back end.
Yeah, the front end the front end are the dishes that are advertised, and yeah, the colorful display at the front. Then the back end are those ones that are doing the cooking at the back. Yeah, the APIs are the waiters, I guess, who make sure that people receive what is being offered, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. The front end make sure customers can actually come into the restaurant, displays what they have in the menu, so that the customer can see what they want to choose. Then when the customer makes an order, the API now goes back behind the back end, collects the order, and passes it and gives it to the customer. Goes through the front end again, because the table that the customer is sitting on is still part of the front end process. Because if there were no tables in the restaurant, I trust if, at least you know what will happen when you bring out the food and there is no place to take to serve the customer. Yeah. So that's nice. All right. So so we said that the DOM is an API, an application programming interface. That's the full meaning of an API. And it's used to effect changes to HTML. Used to effect changes to HTML. And
Please, are you recording?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, used to effect changes to API such that API can interact with that back end. All right, so this is a typical example of a DOM. It's a document. The full meaning of DOM is a document object model. This is a typical example of a DOM. You see, if you check up, you see the HTML equivalent of it. You have your HTML, you have your head, you have your body. Now, if you look at it here, this is the DOM tree. Sorry, the DOM tree has the document. The document is like the page itself. Now, inside that document, you now have your HTML, you now have your header, your head, your title, the text, what is contained in it. In this case, we have JavaScript DOM. Then same here. So you can see that the head and the body are siblings of the same level. They are siblings on the same level. While the title is a child of the head. The title is a child of the head, and the head is a parent of the title. The HTML here is a grandparent of this title. The same thing applies for these P elements. The body is the parent of these P elements, while the P is the child of the body, and the HTML is the grandparent. Now, if I should have another body tag here, another P tag here, or maybe I have another H2 tag here, the H2 and the P are now siblings because they'll be on the same level. Okay, just like we have here, the head element and the body element are siblings on the same level. So this is a typical DOM tree. Why it's necessary to understand this is If you understand it, every other DOM manipulation gets easier to assimilate. All right. Okay, so we'll dive into examples straight away. So we'll start looking at how these things work. I didn't open my VS Code because I've already do this. This is another way of accessing if you want to open VS Code. See, if you just right click, I think we've done this before. For those who don't know, if you open the folder using your terminal. Once you open it using your terminal, you just enter code space dash. It will just open VS Code. Open VS Code of this folder.
I'm sorry, sir. How did you open the folder without using the terminal? I know the code dot code space.
I just right clicked. I have git bash on my system. Git bash is the terminal, but mostly used for Linux.
I have it too.
Yeah, so just right click and open with git bash.
Okay, great.
All right. So this is my VS Code now open. So we are going to go ahead and start working on this. Please, I want you to pay attention. It's a very interesting subject, and you understand it. Sorry, let me go live. Okay. If there is any aspect you need clarification, please don't hesitate to call my attention. Right. So now we haven't said what we said. We said the DOM can be used to arrange HTML. Now, it is our typical code that we've been writing, that we'll be using as an example. We don't have anything here for now. We just have hello world for now. So what we are saying is that this is our hello world here. This is our hello world here. Instead of writing it using this HTML, we can use JavaScript to insert this hello world here. That is what DOM manipulation means. So in this my case now, I have body, as we said before, I have this H1 element, which is a node. Now, each of these are called nodes. Each of these are called nodes. Each of them are called nodes. N-O-D-E, node. They are called nodes. We have element node, we have text node, and we have comment node. For example, this is my comment node. As the name implies, comment. While my text node is just the hello world. Just the hello world. Now my element node could be body. Body is an element. So have different nodes, because I can have, if I write, let me see, hello here. So this hello now is a text node. See, it's showing here. Why this? It's an element node. It's called a node. I just wanted to take note of this point. Well, of course, we don't just write the text. We have to define a HTML element that will house it. Okay. Now, having said that, one of the things we will now go straight and look into without wasting time is how do we now assess? How do we assess HTML elements that are in nodes? How do we select HTML elements from here? How do we select HTML elements from here? I'll go ahead and recreate what I did here. Go ahead and, okay. Should I do that? Okay. What's the best? Okay. Let me just do this. Let me change this to a div. It's better we do an example as we go, as we work. And put, remember ID, CSS ID. I have an ID called, let me call it a root. Okay. As it stands, I don't have anything displayed here. Now, I now go to my script.js. It's my script.js. This is where the manipulations happen. Okay. So we are done with this era of working on the console. Let me just comment out anything that has to do with console.log. Okay. Now the first assignment is I want to select an HTML element in that node. There are several ways of selecting HTML elements, but we'll look at the common ones. The first one is the first method is using get element by ID method. Get element, I'll just get elements by ID. This is a method. Remember when I said method? Let's remind ourselves again, what is a method? A method is okay. You know, when you have an object has property, a key, and a value. A method is when the value of the key to an object is a function. Remember, like here we have, say, this is a method. This function is a method because this is an object, and we have this push here. Now, instead of having it as the normal value would have, we now have a function. So whenever you have that function, it is called a method. All right. So this is a DOM method. This method you're seeing is inside that document. So the document is an object. It's an object that now has this method inside of it. Okay, let's just leave it and go straight to what we're considering. So in order to select elements from the DOM, we have the first method that we could be considering. It says get element by ID. Now, what get element by ID simply means is that it will target an ID name that has been specified in your HTML. In this case, I specified an ID called root. Now, if I want to target this div, I now use get element by ID. So if I say documents, the syntax is you first write document dot get elements by ID. And the ID I have in my HTML is root. Okay, so if I go ahead and assign it a variable, let me assign it a variable. We can assign it a variable called, so we don't get confused. Let me call it my root. I can call it any name. Okay. Now, if I go ahead and console log this, see what I get. I just want to show us what we get, my root. Okay. So let me go ahead and console log this, and let's see what we get. Okay. That is line 520. Having an error on line 520. Okay, all right. And 86 and 87. Let me just remove them. These are what we were working on before. 86 and 87. 86 and 87. All right. Right. So if I refresh now, this is what I have. I have my div. This is my div with the roots. It's saying that this is a div with a class called roots. So this is what I have here. I remember I don't have anything inside of it. It's an empty div. But I give it a class. But if I come and say, okay, let me add something. Let me add a p element. Call it hello. Now see what I get. Hello. So what that get element by ID is doing is selecting everything here. Selecting everything here. So as selecting everything here. So that is how we select an element using get element by ID. Using get element by ID. It's as straightforward as it gets. Just document.get element by ID. You now specify the ID that was used in your HTML document. Please, is this clear? Is this straightforward enough? Is it understood?
Yes, I understand.
Okay. So please, if you have a question, you can interrupt me and ask a question. All right, the second one we'll be looking at is, after get element by ID, we'll now look at query selector. There's another one called query selector. Query selector. Query selector. Now, I've targeted this element as we saw. I've targeted it here, and I'm able to get it. That means that if I want to change the content of this element, I want to change this hello, I can now easily do it. If I want to change it, I can now easily do that because I've been able to target it. And we'll see how to change it and how to insert whatever I want to insert shortly. Just wanted to show you what we've been able to do. Okay. All right, so the next one is query selector. The next one is query selector. Let's see what query selector gives us. Okay. All right, the next way we select element is using query selector. Do the same thing. Document, they all go with the name document, because document is the big parent holding all of them, as we saw in that DOM tree that we displayed initially. Now go with this document you're seeing here is this document. Is this document here. So you see, it's the parent of everything under this page. So when we say document dots, we are calling a method on this document, on the document, get element by ID to now target the ID and retrieve whatever information we need. So query selector, document or query selector, and my query selector, I now select, what do I select? My query select. My query selector, I go ahead and select it. Okay. And let's assign it a variable. Say my course. Like console log my boots. Expectedly, I should get the same results I got before. Get the same result I got. Okay, so let's load this. Sorry, query selector, not by ID. Now, query selector behaves the same way ID behaves, but the first option, we are only targeting the element using the element ID. But in query selector, we are targeting it using the HTML elements. Now, if I go ahead and add, okay, let me say I have two P elements here. One is hello world, and another one is okay. So one selects using the ID, another one selects using the HTML elements. Now, if I go ahead and change this to P, okay, remember I have P elements there. I go ahead and change it to P, I get my P here. That's and this P is this first element. This P. Now, what query selector does is it selects your P. That's it select this P. Now, because I have three P here, query selector selects the first P. It doesn't select the three of them. Now, if I want to select the three of them, I'll use query selector all. Query selector all goes ahead to select everything that has been specified there. I have query selector. It does the same thing with what your ID does, but in this case now it's selecting it based on the HTML element itself, not the ID. Get element by ID is specifically meant to select by ID. Please note, it's specifically meant to select by ID. Why query selector selects both using query selector selects using your ID, using class name, using the element tag. Query selector all. Okay. All right. So in this, let me comment this again. Okay, I remember what happened. So in this case, in this first case, please let me go over it again. I use the ID to select it. Now, query selector all is not specific to a particular method, a particular CSS class. If I want to select using the same ID, all I need to do is to pass the hash to tell it that I'm selecting it using that ID, and I will get the same result I got before. I want to select using ID, I'll pass hash. Okay, yeah. Now you see, it's giving me these elements as we had before. If I want to select using the ID, the mistake I made before was not passing the hash. But query selector, when get element by ID, you don't need to put the hash because you're saying it is you're specifying by ID. Now, because query selector is quite generic, it selects by ID, it selects by, you can use it to select by ID, you can use it to select by the tag name, the element tag name, you can use it to select by even the class name. Like in this case, I've selected it using the ID. If I want to go ahead and select it using the tag name, which I did before using div, I don't need to now put the hash sign. I just need to put div here and change this to, okay, let me comment this one. So I get the same results I got before. Get the same results. Now I'm selecting it using the tag name because I have a tag name called div. If I put P here, it will select the P elements too. I'm selecting it now using the tag name P, and so forth and so on. And if you go ahead and inspect this object, inspect it, it has so many other functions that you can call on it. But for now, we will not be looking into that. Let's just concentrate on how to select it. All right. So having said that, we now know how to select using query selector. So it selects using the ID. You can select it using the element tag name. You can also use it to select using the class name. Let me say, for example, I put a class to this first one. I put a class here and I call this one first. Okay, so if I want to select it using that class name, the same approach, maybe I should just go ahead and when you're watching the video. So this first one, I did it using the ID. Just notes query selector by ID. By ID, that was why I got this one. And this next one is by element tag name. I'll just call it by tag name. That's the HTML element by HTML elements tag name. Okay. So the next one now is by class name, using the class. Okay. So the next one now is by class. Remember, I have a class called first. So if I go ahead and say element.query selector, document.query selector, and I go here, the difference is that now I have to specify a dot. In ID, I specify hash sign. Here, I specify a dot, and I'll select it by the class name. By the class name. See, it's giving me just that first one that I called dot. That is the one is returning back to me. So query selector select is more quite generic. You can use it to select by ID, by class name, by tag name. All right. Now we'll move over to another one. We're considering just 4 of it today because of time. Move over to another one which I mentioned before, query selector all. Now they are the same thing with query selector, but the difference is that, which some of you might have guessed, in this case, the query selector returns only the first object that meets that condition, while the query selector all will return every class, every case. All right. So we're looking at query selector all. Now it behaves similar to query selector. The only difference being that instead of picking just one of the first case that satisfies that condition, it picks everything that satisfies the condition. Like in this case, we are saying document.query selector all, and we are passing the P elements. Remember, I have 3 P elements, so it's picking on them, and it will use them to create an array-like object. We call it a node list, an array-like object. Well, in this case, it's called a node list. As you can see here, it's looking like an array. It's called a node list that has, remember, the first one has a class, the second one does not, the third one does not. So this is what we get using query selector all. So if we had more than one, the same thing both for class name, for elements tag, for of course you cannot use it for ID because according to the rule, you're supposed to have one ID per Supposed to have a unique ID to every segment of your web. So you cannot say query selector or you pass root. Each root is supposed to be one. So in that case, query selector or is not advisable. Rather use it for class, for ID. So that is what query selector or does. Okay. Lastly, on this selecting, I want us to look at get element by tag name. Get element by tag name. Get elements by tag name. Okay. Just as the name sounds, get element by tag name simply means getting it using the HTML tag names. So in this case, it will also return a node list, because in the case of P now, we have, of course, in your website, it is assumed that you definitely have more than one div. So if I say get element by tag name and I pass P here, so it will still return a node list the same way query selector or returns a node list. Get element by tag name. Okay. If you console log this, okay, so you get that same node list we got. So in the case if you have the same, got the same thing, we got all of them. So if you put div here, it will get all the div you have on your page. For now, we just have one div. It will return one div. But if you have more than one div, it will return all the div in an array-like format called a node list. So we've done these four: get element by ID, query selector or get element by tag name. The last two, query selector or and get element by tag name, returns a collection of elements that meet that condition in an array, while the other ones return one element each. Please, is this understood?
Yes, I understand it.
Okay. All right. Now we have other methods in selecting, but I also want to stop with these four. You can go ahead and read on them. We have get element by name. We have get element by class name. Class name is almost the same thing with get element. Is almost the same thing with get element by ID. But in this case, okay, let me do get element by class name. So we have get element by name. You see, get elements by name. Okay, get element by name. I'll have get element by class name. Get elements by class name. Just as we have get element by ID, by class name simply passes the class that was defined there. So you can read up on these two. So we'll move on to some other things. So having said that, now we're going to be looking into another aspect of the DOM, which is assessing the DOM elements. As I told you, I said we have parent node and we have child node. So if I get, for this, let's stick with this. This is my root, and this is, change this to, let's say, paragraph. You can call it any name, please. Paragraph. And I come here and I say, mistake in my query selector. The most popular ones I know you'll be using often are get element by ID and query selector. So I have P. So if I come here and I see, remember I have this paragraph, and then I see paragraph dot parent node. Without saying much, the parent node of that paragraph should be the div. So you see, it returned the div for me. But the parent node of this P is this guy here. So it's returning back that div. So that is another way you can access node and parent node. That just by the way, I wanted us to note that. But if I also, like in this case, my roots, if I go ahead and say I want to see the children of that root, and I say console.log, I have my roots dot children, my root dot children. Okay, I have a collection of this P. Child node. Same thing. But child nodes now gives me everything inside of it, all the text and everything that has been written inside the text, the P, spreads them. All right. So I just wanted us to note that. Children and child nodes. Okay, let's move into more interesting things. So we've seen how to access this element. Now, after accessing it, we've accessed the element. What if we want to recreate this thing? Let's go ahead and remove everything. This one is, you have an HTML element. But what if in a case where we don't have anything here? We don't have anything here. Let me comment it out. So it's empty. The screen is empty, or let me just go ahead and delete it. Now I want to use JavaScript to embed text inside of this. We've seen how to access what was already created. What if we don't have anything? I now want to use JavaScript to embed it inside. How do we now go ahead and to do that? That's what we want to look into now. Now we're looking into how to creating elements using JavaScript. Creating elements. Creating elements using JS. Okay. All right. So we use the create element method, document.create element methods to create elements, and document can go ahead and create. I want to create the first div. Remember, I have a root div. I want to create the first div, and I go document dot create elements. Okay, I go ahead and pass what I want to create. I want to create a div. So this has already created a div for me, but it's not showing on my screen yet. If I go ahead and console log this div that was created, okay, it's showing here. I can console log it, but it's not displaying here yet. So this is how you create an element. So any element you want to create, be it a div, be it a p element. Okay, we had a div and we also had p elements. Let's create 3 p elements. Okay, the first one, we call it should we call it P1? Let's just give it simple names. Let's call it P1. Dot create element P. We are creating these elements. We have 3 P's there. P1, P2, and P3. Okay, so we are creating them. Now, if we console log them, can console log them individually and see what we have. I console log, I have my div. Let me put P1. Okay, it should return my div and my P. Or let me just put it right. So I have div, I have P1. Just to confirm that it's been created. Because if it's not created, JavaScript will return an error that there is no such thing like P1, P2, and P3. Okay, so I have them, I've created them. Now, I have created them here, but I'm not reflecting yet on my browser. So this is how you create elements. If you want to create H2 element, H3 element, any element you want to create, a span element, anything you want to create, not only P. This doesn't apply to P. I can also create a H1 element here. Remember, these names on the left-hand side, you can give it any name of your choice. I'm just calling it H1, H2, H3 to correspond with the names. You can give it any name. Let me call this one. Okay, let me call it so I don't get called. Let me call it heading 1. So it's heading 1, and I create a heading element, H1 element. So it has been created. So this is how you create elements from scratch. You're going ahead to create this element from scratch. If I've created the H1 element, the P element, and the div. Created them from scratch. Now, this is where I'm going to. This is what I want to target. I want to form something like this. Let me add. Oh, I deleted it. Pardon me. Let me bring it back so that we'll see where we are heading to. Pardon me. Let me bring it back. I'll comment it out. Okay. So this is what we're heading to. I want to create something like this. H1 element, say the heading. Heading. This is what I want to create. First one say hello, second one hello world, and hello people. All right. So let's go ahead and comment it out. All right. So we've created a div, we've created heading H1, we've created the 3P elements, but it's not showing on our browser. Now, this is how you create elements. The next step to be looking at now is how to create the elements. Now, how do you add content to these elements that you've created? How do you add content to these elements that you've created? Adding content or adding text to created elements. Okay. So we know that our H1 element has the word header. Now there are 3 ways of adding text to each element. You can use documents. You can do it using documents.innertext, documents.innertext. Inner text. We have document.innertext. We have documents.inner HTML. Inner HTML. We have documents.text content. Text content. Okay, so we have the 3 of them. These are how we attach text or to these elements that has been created. Okay, now the first one, inner text, as the name implies, we are adding an inner text to what we created. Inner text and inner content. We're adding an inner text to what you created. But inner HTML, you're adding the whole HTML, probably with the text inside of it. Let me go ahead and demonstrate the examples. Remember that we created these 3 divs. Before, let me go ahead and demonstrate how to use inner HTML first. Inner HTML first. Okay, so let me do inner HTML first. Okay, no, let me just go ahead and do the inner text. I'll do that one last and I'll explain why. So we're looking at how to use inner text. So we've created these 3 elements, our first key element. Now I want to add an inner text to it. Remember that I stored it in a variable called P1. So if I say P1 dot text content, and I say equal to, we called it hello. If I remove this here now and place it here to console log my P1, it now becomes hello. My P1 now becomes oh, sorry. My P1 is still what it was. I didn't save it in a variable. The variable name is still P1. So, okay. Just a sec. Okay, you can say P1 dot text contents. Also P1 dot text contents. Yeah, we now have hello. So see, the text content, you can use it to read what is already been stored, and you can use it to write what is. In this case, I formed a text content called hello, and I was just trying to read it out to know what I formed. I see it giving me hello. So if I do P1 dot text content, I get hello. So this now we've succeeded in now adding a text to our P1 elements that we formed, that we created. The same thing applies to P2. I think we said it was hello world. And the last one was hello people. So these were the 3. This is how you add text Now, I can decide to use inner text. Okay, let me use inner text here. This is how you do it with the text content. Let me go ahead and use inner text here, p1.inner text. Gives me the same result. I'm still adding it. So you can use inner text and text content, but I'll tell you the difference and why is preferred to the other. Okay. So then the same thing goes for P for my H1. I say I called it heading 1. Sorry, heading 1 dots. Let me still use inner text. And we said it was, this is a heading. This is a header, something. Okay. So this, so I've succeeded in adding text to them, to these 3 things. I succeeded in adding text to these 3 things. Okay. Sorry, this is P3. P3. Okay. All right. So I've added text to these 3 things. And this is how you add your text to the 3 of them. Using either inner text or text content. Now, on using inner HTML, now let me tell you how inner HTML works. Okay, how do I define it? Okay, let's say for some reason I decide to create another. Let me create another div so I can explain inner HTML. Let me create another div so that I can now explain inner HTML. I go ahead and create another div, but I have to give it another name. Now I call it div2. And I say create another div. Now this div doesn't have anything inside of it. Now if I want to create inner HTML, it means that I'm forming an HTML inside of that div2. So if I say div2.inner HTML, what is expected from me now is not just a text, but HTML. Say maybe I want to write a second heading 2, and says this is a smaller header. So you see, I'm not just writing the text content, the text that will be embedded in the HTML elements, but I'm also writing the HTML elements. So this is what your inner text does, inner HTML does. So my div, I have added this H1 element. I've created the div and added this H1 element with the content of it inside it. So if I go and console log div2, if I console log div2, console log div2, okay. I console log div2. Let's see our results. So this is the div. Yeah, the div. If you search down somewhere, you see the P. See inner HTML. Can you see? Inner HTML is the smaller header, but inner text. If you see what's happening here. You see this is without the HTML elements tag. Is that clear? Is that clear, please?
Yeah.
Any questions?
Yes, sir. It's clear, sir.
So far. All right.
It's clear,
So this is how you add text to created elements. Now, having done all this, it's still not displaying on our browser. That is where we're going to. We need to make them display on our browser. That is where, the node, the parents node and the children node I told you about, this is where it comes in handy. Now we attach them in the order. Now you use a method called append child method. Adding created elements to so the documents. Let me just say to the documents. Okay. So we want to add them to the documents. Now, you use the append child method. This append child method, it's append child method. It's called append child method. Append child method. Okay. Now, append child method, what it does is it appends whatever you pass into it. It has no commas. Okay, this is it now. It came out. All right. So the append child method, what it does for you is it will append whatever you pass into this place. It will append it as the last element in your tree. Please don't forget these three. Your append child now will append it like, let's say you want to append it to the body. If you say you should append to body, it will append it after your text. So the whatever you're appending comes last, comes underneath. So it will append it to the last, to the last element. It will make it the last element in whatever you are appending. Please don't forget that. It's very important. Please don't forget, very important. It will append it as the last element. So it will append it as the last element in your DOM tree. Append it as the last element in your DOM tree. So if I want to go ahead, if now want to get what we had, remember that in this format, what do we have first? We have our div. This is our first div. Okay, I've introduced another div. I introduced another div here. I introduced another div here. Remember the one that has h2 inside of it. So let me just write it out here. And I'll still comment it out. This is a second. Okay. So this is what we are expecting to get. So let me also comment this out. All right. So the first thing we have is, this one is in this category, in this first div. Of course, this div is the parent housing these three things inside. So it is logical that these two divs are siblings. These two divs are siblings. So if I want to append them now, it means that this one has to come first and this div comes second. This is our div 2 comes second, but it's not written div 2 here, note. Now, so if I want to attach the first one, the one that has those 3p and the h1 elements, it becomes my first. So if I go ahead and now say, this is what I'll now do. Please follow me. And I say documents. I'm calling on the documents model now. Dot body. Why is it body? Remember that if you come back here, it's attached to the body elements. Document dot body dot append child. Append child. I will now pass in div. That was my first div. Let me call it div 1. That was my first div. I have now appended it here. It's still not showing, and I'll tell you why it's not showing. So I've appended it to the body. Now this my div is now attached to the body. But why it's not still showing is because I've not attached its children to it, because the children are the ones that are carrying the contents that are written in that div. But let's say if I attach div 2, immediately you see something displaying. Let me attach div 2. See? Because div 2 already has content inside of it. Now, if I'm attaching div 1 is not displaying yet because I haven't attached other elements. Now, if I want div 1 to display, what I need now to do is, we go like this. Okay, we've attached the main, the apparent. Then I'll now go and say div 1 dot append child. What is the first thing that was displayed there? The heading. Remember, the heading was our first element. Heading 1. I've appended it. See, this is the heading. Now, if I go again and call div 1, I say div 1 dot append. I'm appending another child. The child I'm to append now is the child that comes after the heading, which is P1. And append P1. P1 is displayed. See? If I go ahead and if I want to display the next one, I append P2. Dot append child. Then P2 and so forth and so on. I append P3, I get the same results. I append P3, I get the same results. So this is it now displaying. What happened? Sorry, this is div 2. 1. Okay. So this is what we had before, replicated using pure JavaScript. Now, finally, I can now go ahead and append, even if I do it here, it's still fine. And now append div2 here. So what it simply does is it's appending this first guy to the object, to the body. But remember that this guy is a parent to these ones. So it will append this one first. Now attach each children to it before finally appending the one that comes the sibling of this. Please, is this understood? Because you might be wondering, okay, since we have line 598 here. Please give me a sec. Yeah.
Hello.
All right, sorry for that.
No.
Okay, so let's go ahead. So in this,
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Please, sir, this div1 and div2, do you give it from HTML?
So now this is where we created it. Remember, this is where we created div1. This is our div1 here.
Okay.
This is our div1 where we created it first.
Okay.
So because I have line 598 under line 597, it doesn't mean that this is small, it's supposed to appear here. No. What JavaScript is rather doing is the first one I appended, that is the one it will run first because it runs from up to down. Div1 will be created first to the document, to the body object. Now, if attach the div to this body, but remember that the heading you are attaching, you are not attaching it to body. You are rather attaching it to the div1 that was created. If I change, if you are rather attaching it to the div1 that was created. See, you attach it to div1. So it happens in that order. Since I have attached div1 to body, it will not, and I'm saying, even if I bring this line, the only reason why line 598 will show before line 597 or will show before this other one if I move it up. Let's say I move it up. See, I move it up. Now what I'm saying is as attach this one first before attaching this one as its second sibling, as its last sibling. Because as I told you, appends it to the end of that node. It appends it to the end of that node. So these two are siblings. Now this first sibling now has other children. Of course, in a family tree, you will not say if you're classifying family, okay, div1 is a unit of a family, div2. So you have to pack all the children that belong to div1 and feed it first before moving to div2. Because since div1 came first in the hierarchy, is the firstborn, is the first child. So every of his children will also be in that place. Then after them, div2 will not appear because div2 is the sibling. So I want us to get that understanding and know how it goes. A typical scenario, let me just, this is by the way, though. You know, the royal family, Queen of England and the rest. I think right now we have Prince Charles and we have Williams and his brother. Now, if the next person that will inherit that throne now in Prince Charles's family is Williams. Now, if Williams is living, unless Williams does not have anybody from his own direct family, the next person in line will now be his brother. So that is the same thing happening because Williams is the firstborn, and this other Andrew is the secondborn. So you don't cross him, you don't cross Williams' entire family and move over to Andrew. No. The same thing applies here. We've attached this to this. Even if this one comes here, it doesn't change anything. Or it can, to avoid further confusion, you can even bring it down and put it after this. But what I'm trying to emphasize is the fact that these ones belongs in one family. So they'll be together. Meanwhile, this one, div2 and div1 are siblings. of the same tree, of the same parent. And their parent this time around is the body. The body is the parent for div 1 and div 2, while the body is the grandparent for heading 1, P1, P2, and P3. Is this clear, please?
It's clear, sir.
Okay. Okay, so we have 5 minutes before our session ends. If you don't have any question, I would like to move on to some other things. I'll just introduce something today. And okay, I wanted to say something about, because you might be asking, I have inner text and I have text content. I would advise it is preferable to use text contents. This one is the one that is preferably used. Inner context is, you understand as time goes on. One of the things we look in when you build applications is the expensive nature of your code. When they say a code is expensive, is a code that requires more time to load or more data to be processed. Now, inner text is more expensive than text content. So if you want to assign text to created HTML elements, preferably you use text content, not inner text. The reason being that I wish I can create a small example for you to understand. Inner text processes. Okay, let's just give a small example. Okay, just remind me in our next class. Let me give you a small example. Because of our time, I want to do touch an important part that we didn't touch. Remember that our div had a root class, a root ID, and our P1, our first P had a class. Remember? So how do we now add IDs to these elements that we've created? We have a D1, a div1 element here. So we can go ahead and add an ID to our div1 element. But advisably, let me do it just after I created the div, at least to make my code cleaner. So I can say div1 dot ID. That is it. And go ahead and write root. So your div1 now has a root. The div1 now has an ID called root. The same thing for P1. P1 had a class. Just do P1 dot. In this time around, it's called class name. Call it class name whenever you're assigning it. And the class name was first. So you see, if I go ahead and console log either P1 or div, you see, let me go ahead and console log it here so that you see. See, I now have my first. Same thing with my div 593. Where is 593? 593. Okay, if I do D1 here, give me with an ID of roots. See, so this is how you assign an ID and a class to elements from your JavaScript. So this brings us to the end of this class today. And please, I want you to please remind me in our next class. Let's look at the difference between inner text and text content. Okay. All right.
Okay, sir.
Never mind. Let's do it today. This class will soon end. We'll just start a new one and we'll discuss it. So we're done with this. Because from next time we'll be looking at event handlers. So once the time winds up, please log in back. All right. So what's the difference between inner text and text content? This is the difference. I told you that we preferably use text content because inner text is more expensive. And let me explain what I mean by more expensive. Okay. Now remember we've added a class name to our P1. Our P1. How do I do this? Our P1. Okay. For the sake of explaining that, I'll go ahead and activate what we did here before. Let me activate this first one. Just for the sake of explaining that, nothing more. So I'll remove everything I did here just to explain what I meant by that. Point out these things. So we don't have them displayed here. So this one is coming from our normal HTML. Because we've not appended them, so they are coming from there. Because until you append, it doesn't understand that you want it to be displayed in the browser yet. So right, before we call it a day today, let's briefly rush this. For the sake of what I want to explain, I'll remove everything I did here before, but we'll still come back to them because this is what we'll be doing. Okay? For the sake of what I explained, let me just comment them out. Okay. Let's start from here. Right. Now, this is my regular HTML. So let me apply an inline styling here. So I have this hello, and I now have this one. Let me apply style. Remember how we did inline styling now? We've not forgotten about it. Say display, say none. Display none means it will not display. So you see, I don't have this hello world displayed again. Let me use this to explain it. So I have two P elements. I have H1 element, P element, and I have this hello world. I passed it a style, display. I said none. So it's not showing on my browser anymore. So what is showing is just hello. Now this is the difference between it. So I want to go ahead and okay, let me say, okay, this is my roots. So if I come to my JavaScript, remember how we select, we said document got get element by ID. We selected our roots. Make console log it here. And this is our roots. Our root contains this, everything here. You scroll down, you see those elements written there. Now, remember how we could add elements to created, we could add text and we could read from text. We are using text contents. So now we want to see the difference between text content and inner text. If I want to add a text, I will do, if I want to add a text, please don't confuse it. These two, inner text and inner, they can be used to do the both. You can use it to read from a created object to see the text content of it, or to use it or save it in a variable and use it for something else. And you can also use it to create one. You can use it to read, like in this case, we're creating. And I think there was a point where we now read it, where we did this p1.text contents. Just text content. In this case now, we're reading what we've already created. So you can use it to create and to read. So let's use it to read here. That is where we can appreciate the difference. So if we do console.log my roots dot inner text and see what we get. Okay, my root dot inner text. We are getting the heading and hello world. Okay, let me do something again. My root 2. I'm creating 2 because we can't use the same variable name. So I want to console log my root 2 dot text contents. Let's see the difference. All right, the first one up, the heading and hello inner text. The second one, the heading hello world. This hello world is the hidden text, but when you use text content, it is displayed. You see it, sorry, you see it, but it's not displayed. Now, inner text gives you what the user sees. It takes into account all the CSS that were applied to those HTML elements and simply displays what the user will see. Of course, we said the user should not see hello world, that should be hidden. So that the inner text takes that into account. So the user doesn't see hello world because it's hidden from the user. But text content does not care. So if you want to get what you text content brings out everything that's in that every text that is contained in that element that we are querying. While inner text gives you everything that the user sees in the elements that we are querying. In this case, we've hidden hello world from the user. So inner text brings only what the user will see. Now, why they say it's more expensive than text content is, for every update you make, inner text will go back and check your CSS. It will check your CSS and it will now return back what you have. So it's like it is processing everything. It will go through all the elements, checking if CSS will apply to them. So that takes more time and more space. But text content will just go ahead and remove every text that is contained in that variable. So that is the major difference between the both of them. So in case it comes up in the question, sometimes somebody they might ask you, let me say another very let's do this text transform. Someone should remind me, no matter I've forgotten my CSS. Text transform. We have uppercase, okay? So we are saying that this hello world should be uppercase. So the user will see it as uppercase. But see what happens here. Between this, remember the word up is inner text, the one down is a text content. In inner text, you see it as uppercase, but text content does not care about the CSS that was applied. It just goes into this div element and removes everything that is text in it and gives you. While your inner text will now go through them, check if any CSS property was applied to them, and if the CSS property affects the text. So that's why they say it's more expensive than text content. So whenever you want to assign or read value from whenever you want to assign or read value from or read text from an element, it's advisable to use text content instead of inner text. Please, is this clear? Is this clear? Okay. All right. The reason why I had to comment out this was because we've not learned how to add styles using CSS, using JavaScript. It's still possible. That's why I had to go back here because I didn't want to confuse us. So for today, what we did was how to read elements. So let me go ahead and remove all this now. I can now remove everything here and go back. I guess I can also comment out this. Okay, so this is where we started our operation. We started our work, created them here. So created div2. We added text to each of them here. Here. And this is where we appended appended them here so that they can be displayed on our browser. Okay. So having said that, this is typically how to write to your browser using JavaScript. They will be giving something like this that is empty. Sometimes they will give you with just a div inside. You now have to know how to add text to this HTML element using your JavaScript. So that is where we'll go so far for DOM. We also see the same way we did with HTML. You can also add your CSS styles using your DOM, which we'll also look at in our next class. But for today, I wanted to introduce something that is very important when dealing with DOM. When dealing with our DOM, okay, let's just go ahead and look at how to add CSS. It's pretty straightforward. We know that, okay, let's say for P3, say P3 dot style column. Okay, so this is how you add your styling. As you see, our P3 has a background color of red. So just call the style on it dot. Remember when using JavaScript, you know, if you were using CSS, this background color will be written like this dash color, all in small letter. When you're using CSS, it is written in camel case together, background color. And VS Code even takes care of that for you, so you don't have to worry about that. So this is how you add style. So any style you want to add, you can add it here using your JavaScript. Want to change the font, if you want to do anything, but now as you would imagine, you have to go ahead and start adding the styles one by one. So that is why it's still preferable to go through to use your CSS. Just click the CSS, style your CSS file here and target your elements and start styling them. And how do you target them? Remember that we'll give it an ID here. So if I target this ID, this ID is applicable to this. So you can go ahead and give class, we give it an ID, we give a class name. So if I create a CSS file here, link it up, just the way I would normally do it to JavaScript. But the most important thing is that I have. So if I go ahead and even call P elements, it will create it for all my P elements in my style sheet. All right. So I haven't said that. I just want to rush this because I know it's something that is pretty straightforward. I want to add it here. You have to do this one after the other for every element you intend to add. Unless another approach is to use document query selector all. After using query selector all, let's just practicalize it. Okay. Say okay. Const say all P. All paragraphs. All paragraphs. The paragraphs. We are selecting all our P. All our P. Let's see, paragraphs, style, then returns a node. So let me see. Oh, it's not work because it returns a node. Cannot set properties. No. So what happened here? When it was here, it was an empty array. It's quite interesting. You see, while I pasted it here, it returned an empty node list because it has searched through these documents. That searched through the document is not finding any paragraph, even if I've created the paragraph, but because I haven't appended it to the document itself, so it was returning an empty node list. When I came and pasted it here, because I've already appended it, now it now exists. So I now have my three piece. But of course, as you know, this is an array. Of course, this is an array, so I think I understand why this will not work. I understand why this will not work. Go to this. Okay. Now, because I'm treating it now like an array, this one means get the first element and change the side color to blue. So you can actually use looping. You can loop it. Use for each loop. When you use for each loop, you change the side colors to blue. Hope I'm not confusing us. I wanted to take this thing gradually so we don't get confused. Hope we are not confused.
So I'm confused. Please, let's take it gradually.
Okay. Let me leave. Let me leave this class. See what we'll do. For now, just understand that you can also use JavaScript to add styles to your elements. In this our case, we've created the P3 elements. It's already existing. We now said P3.style.background color. We change the background color. If you want to change background color of another one, maybe P1. I want to change the color of P1. I say P1.style.color. Instead of background color, now call color, and I change it to red or something. So it has changed to red. So if you want to target any element, you have to target one after the other. But if you want to target them as a group, like what we are trying to do here, you now have to use a function to do that, which is something that we'll do as we progress. But for now, all you can do is just create your normal CSS style.css and style it the way you would usually style it if you had created it with your HTML. Is that clear? Hello?
With you, sir, it's
Yes,
clear.
sir. Yes, it's clear.
All right. Now let me introduce something called events, JavaScript events. JavaScript events. JavaScript events. I'll introduce it today and we'll finish it up next week. Events are more like actions that occurs in your browser. They are actions that occur in your browser. And those actions either trigger a change or cause something to happen to your browser, depending on the action depending on what you want to happen. Now we have different types of events. We have the click events, we have the mouse events, and we have different events. But the popular one that we know is the click events. That when the user clicks on something, this will happen. We have the key press event. When the user presses this key, this will happen. We have several of them, but most often what we use is the click event, which I know you understand this. Most times we are clicking, we are clicking, we are clicking. All right. So that action is called an event. Is a JavaScript event. Now, these events are actions that are triggered that are triggered from the user side. Now, these actions, when triggered, after being triggered, they are now being processed by something called event handlers or event listeners. We have events that will now have event handlers. They're also called event listeners. These are the ones now, as the name implies, that handles the corresponding action that this event needs. Let's say a user clicks on a button, that is the click event. Now, what do I want to happen? I want the background color to change. Now, the event handler is the one that now comes up with a code that changes the background color. So the event handler is just a code. It's just a function that is being called whenever an event is triggered. Just a function that is being called whenever an event is triggered. So we have events that will now have event handlers or event listeners. Please, before our next class, I want you to do your own research, find out what events are, what are the different events we have. I'll give you some examples. We have the click, we have the mouse events, we have the key press events, we have so many of them. Find out these events and know what they mean. And in our next class, we'll go full into it and try to understand how they work. So I want to stop here for today. Go ahead, watch the video, ask your questions within the week, and I will drop in something within the week. I will drop in a page and I want you to recreate it using just JavaScript. Just as we did here, I will drop in a small page and I want you to recreate what is on the page using pure JavaScript. and adding CSS styling to it. So, unless you have questions, do you have any questions?
Okay. I want to find out the recorded video. I get it.
Okay, it's sent as a mail to everybody. If you don't have it, what you do, you can drop your email address on the, just mention me and on the WhatsApp chat and drop your email, just like us. You click on my name so that I will see it
Okay, on WhatsApp.
on the WhatsApp. Yes, on the WhatsApp. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions before?